All right, folks, so we are getting started on our crochet piece. So the first step with any crochet or knitting piece is our slip knot. So this is where I like to make a slip knot. I make an X over my fingers and pass the loop through. But I find for a lot of beginners that can be hard to understand. So other way to do it is just to do it on the table. Have your short end of your yarn facing towards you, cross it over, pass the long end underneath so it looks like a pretzel, pull the long end underneath, and you're good. And then you can pull that tighter to fit around your crochet hook because obviously right now it is far too big. So once we have that small enough that it's reasonable, we can stick our crochet hook in and adjust it from there. So I'm using medium weight yarn and I think a 5mm hook. I'd have to check. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to do 20 chain stitches. So we put our yarn over and we pull through the loop that's on our hook. And you can see we're making this almost braided texture as we go. I like to pinch the yarn that I'm working on as I go for chain stitches. I just find it makes it a little bit easier to pass through because there's not really anything else to grab onto at this point. So go through, do 20 of those. So we have now created our 20 chain stitches, and if you look at it, it looks almost like a braid going up. We are now going to do one more stitch because that is our turning stitch. So we'll talk about what that means. We're going to put our crochet hook in the second loop from the hook. We're not going to go through both sides of the braid. I find for a chain stitch, it's easier to just do back loop only. It tends to go a lot smoother. So we're just sticking our crochet hook through the loop, pulling one loop through, and then yarn over, pull through. So we stick through, we catch a loop, we yarn over, we pull through the two loops, and that's your single crochet. So we yarn over once we are through the pre-existing loop, and we'll do 20 of those. So we are nearing the end of our first single crochet row. That is our last stitch there. You can tell because it's right by that knot. So that is our first row. So we want to make sure that our top side stays up, and you can see that it's still got that braided texture on top. That's going to be important as we go through. So each row we finish will have that loop into loop, almost braided texture to look like. So we're going to turn. So we're going to chain one, and we're going to turn our work around, and we're going to do one more row of single crochets. We're not going to go in the loop closest to the hook. We're going to go in the one far away. For our last stitch, we started in back loop only for chain stitch. We don't do that for single crochet unless it's a specific pattern request, because it creates a line that is not always how we want things to look. So we have to go through both sides of the braid when it's not into a chain stitch because just texturally it's better. So if you look at it from the side, you can see there's a hole underneath those two braids. That's where your hook goes. So you stick through, yarn over, stick it through, yarn over, pull. And if you accidentally miss, just pull it back out and make sure that you do get both of those loops, because it will look wrong if you don't get both. So we'll continue that all the way to the end of the row. So 20 single crochet stitches in total. Okay, so we have now finished our second row of single crochet. As always, I do recommend counting your stitches after every single row, particularly when you are a beginner. As you get more experience with crochet or knitting or whatever fiber arts you're working on, you develop tricks. So maybe you're going to have a stitch marker every 50 or whatever. But for right now, I really, really, really recommend counting your stitches every time, because some of the most common mistakes for a new crocheter or knitter to make is not having accurate stitch counts. So dropping or accidentally adding a new one. So we're going to start working on half double crochet. So we're going to do 2 chain stitches here. I had accidentally put my crochet hook back in wrong and it was twisted. So we're going to do 2 chain stitches, and instead of going on the second one from the loop, we're going to go into the third. So basically going back into the main body of the fabric. So ignoring those 2 chain stitches that we made. So instead of, or unlike a single crochet, we are going to yarn over before we pull up our loop. And the reason that is we want to have the 3 loops on the hook before we go back in. So we'll yarn over, we'll stick our hook through, we'll pull our new loop through, and then we're going to pull through all 3 at once. So this is the key difference between a half double crochet and a double crochet, which we'll get to in a minute. This is the only stitch where we will ever pull through 3 at once. So yarn over, stick through, pull, etc., onward and upward. So we've counted our stitches, we have made sure that we have the 20 that we started with. And again, you can kind of see for the half double crochet, it's just a little bit taller than it is for the single crochet. I'll show you that when it's a little bit, we've done our next row and it's a little bit more or easier to see. So we're now going to do another row of half double crochet. So we're going to chain 2, we're going to do our yarn over, we are going to put our crochet hook through the 3rd loop from our hook, and as always we pull through all 3. So we've finished our second half double crochet row. We are confirming that we still have 20 stitches, because again, that is where beginners make their most mistakes, is dropping or accidentally adding a stitch. So we're going to put that back on our hook. You don't have to take your hook out between rows. This is just easier for me to show you what we're working on. So now we're going to work on double crochet. So we're going to chain 2 again. We're going to yarn over, and we're going to go into the 3rd loop from the hook. And instead of pulling through all 3 at once, we're going to pull through the first 2 loops. So we'll pull through those 2, and you'll see that there's still 2 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through those 2. So that's why it's a half double crochet and a double crochet. It's very, very similar, but there's just that one difference of pulling through all 3. So the double crochet ends up being quite a bit taller than the half double crochet. Half double crochet is like halfway between a single crochet and a double crochet. But it's very, very similar in terms of our steps. We just have one extra step of pulling through. So continue with your double crochet until you have 20 stitches done. So we have finished our double crochet round. So again, we're just confirming the number of stitches that we have, making sure it is still 20. So if we take a look here, you can see how short the single crochet stitches are down there. Very, very small, very, very compact. Half double crochet is a little bit taller, and then there's a significant height difference coming up to the double crochet. So half double crochet is actually very, very much a halfway point between the single and double. And then double, you start to really notice that height. So double crochet is one of the most common stitches you'll notice for things like granny squares, hexagon cardigans, things like that. They work up very fast because double crochet does so much. So again, we chain 2. We're going to go into the third chain from the hook because we're doing more double crochet. So we're doing that 2 at a time, and we'll continue through. So we yarn over, we pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, grab your third, pull through 2, pull through 2. So continue on until you hit the end of that row. So we are counting, confirming we have the 20 stitches that we need, and that is the end of our second double crochet row. So if you look at it flat like this, you can really, really see the difference in terms of how tall these stitches are. So single crochet is a very, very small stitch. It's a very tight stitch. So it often gets used for things like stuffed animals because it has such few gaps between. Whereas the double crochet, you can see the gaps between the yarn. Where if you were making something like an amigurumi stuffy, the stuffing would quite frankly leak out. So we're now going to go to treble crochet. So this stitch is not very common. I'll tell you about when it often gets used. So we're going to start with 3 chain stitches, and then we're going to go into the 4th loop from our hook. So we're going to wrap around twice. We're going to pull through. So we have 4 loops on our hook, and then same as double crochet, we're just going to pull through 2 at a time till we get all the way up to the top. So we wrap around twice, we go through our loop, we have 4, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we're pulling that through 3 times. So thus treble or triple crochet. Treble is the technical term. A lot of people do call it triple crochet. It is a very, very tall stitch. This stitch tends to not be used very often at all. I find the most common way that this stitch gets used is if somebody is making something with a mesh texture. So in that case, they tend to be using a treble or triple crochet combined with chain stitches to make squares. So this is not a very often used stitch. You can see again, it's very, very tall. It has those massive gaps in between, which even compared to the double crochet is very, very noticeable, particularly when you then look at the single crochet, which has basically nothing in comparison. So basically the taller our stitches get, the larger the gaps are between them because they only attach at the bottom and the top of the stitch, which makes it a little bit just a function of it. So if you want something that has a lot of density to it and is very stiff, single crochet is a great stitch for that. If you want a little bit more drape or breathiness, or you're making, again, a mesh type thing, you're going to veer towards the taller stitches and things like that as well. So thing you'll notice here, I haven't done the last stitch. And if you haven't done the last stitch, you will see that shelf. You do not want that shelf to be there. This is obviously the most common if you are doing something that is square. It is the most, or rectangular. It is the most noticeable if you are doing taller stitches. You might not always notice it for single crochet, but you can tell the difference for taking that out. Now, what I'm counting here is what we call the posts. So this is the upwards movement of each stitch. I can go through and count 20 of those and then also note my chain stitches that I had at the end there. Those 20, I can basically count those instead of counting the loops at the top. That is an option when you get to a tall enough stitch that it's really easy to differentiate post from post, but that is not always the case. So we're going to do more treble crochet. So again, we're going in that fourth loop from the hook. We yarn over twice, go in through that fourth loop, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two. And we'll continue on with that until we reach the end of our row. So just finishing up our treble crochet stitches here. Again, just showing you that you will notice that shelf, that little almost backwards L shape, if you accidentally forget a stitch at the end. So we yarn over twice. Sometimes it slips off and just go back, start over. Yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two. So then in comparison, we see that kind of not entirely straight, but straight-ish line on the side. We can see that we're not missing a stitch. It's lining up carefully. Again, we can count those 20 posts and see that it is 20 stitches. It'll be 20 plus the chain stitches we did to start our row. So don't freak out if you're like, wait, why are there 21? It's just your chain stitches. So again, we can do the same thing by counting our loops at the top. That one, you just have to be a little bit more conscious of how it translates into the chain stitches, because theoretically you could start counting down the chain stitches and confuse yourself. So this is what our piece looks like now that it is done. So we have the 2 single crochet lines there, 2 half double crochet stitches, 2 double crochet stitches, and 3 treble crochet stitches. You can see they get taller and taller the farther you go. They are tighter together towards the bottom. So ending any crochet piece, you're going to pull your loop larger. You would theoretically cut your yarn, but I reuse this immediately for a knitting demo. So I just pass my yarn through and you can pull it tight. So that locks the stitch in place once you weave in the ends. So you would take the ends here. So what you've cut, what you haven't cut, you would weave them in, usually going up and down through posts.